For today's presentation, we will reenact the good old days of November 2008, when I would start down here at southern end of my property and go for a run every morning, at dawn actually, on straight up the mountain to what we call a helicopter pad. Of course, that was 4 years ago and 30 pounds ago. We're heading up along the drive here where some of my plantings had pepper trees to line the driveway. I reached the first of my original hard spots. My road intersects with Chimney Canyon Road. Heading up to my cattle guard, which is not on the property line, but the best place I could put it. Okay, approaching my northwest corner, I see my no trespassing sign there, and the fence George Hart put up runs up the hill there. So I meet the George Hart property, Galen Illman property, and the Steve Schneider property. Looking back east, you can see my tanks and my oleanders along the road there. Now we came out of the driveway heading directly north, and we turned west at the property line, and we'll head up to the west before we'll turn north again. At this point I'm on Steve Snyder's property, my westerly neighbor, and when I first bought it, this property is owned by his mom, Lillian, who actually was a partner with Betty Wells, who bought a 160. Turning back north, we will head up towards the Ullman property. But we can look off to the west and see the Kern property, who's now the Graham, Specker, and Ortega property. The two-story garage up there is Mr. Paul Ogren's on his property. A view after we kind of level off here structures on the ridge line up there. There are actually 4 100 square foot buildings that they lived in, built just after they got the restraining order so they could sit up there and monitor my movements. Looking down to get an idea of the elevation gain. Yonder tree marks the boundary, the 250 yard, my original stay away in the restraining order. That's 250 yards from her southwest corner. We actually curved back north here again. We're on George Hart's property now. She used to sit up there with her 60 power spotting scope. Actually picked boogers out of my nose down at the cabin. At this moment, I'm on what was Mrs. Keith's property, and it follows that road around up to their gate. Several hundred yards, I guess. At this point, we're crossing onto Mr. Paul Ogren's property. Coming up now to what was Mrs. Keith's gate. That's Paul's two vehicles. He had a Volkswagen parked here too, and they had a tractor parked here, just on this side of those two wooden posts there. On that fateful morning, Mr. Randy Shepard was backing his Kubota tractor out of that gate. So I kind of paused and said, "Hey, Randy." And boy, he threw that thing in the forward gear and beat it back in towards the cabin. We're now coming up on Paul Ogren's gated area. Just about every morning back in 2008, Paul would be out here. He had 2 horses, pastured either down that way or right up here. He would be up here feeding his horses. Now this is like dawn. It was about 6:15 when I came by, a.m. I mean, he was always here. For some reason, on this particular morning, he wasn't. Coming up now on the property that actually belongs to Mike Godwin. Area littered with what we call blue rock, where it's actually granite, decomposing granite. looking back at some of the Keith's property, I remember back in the day, in the 70s, I guess, talking to Norm Callan, old Cal, said that David Oakley had hired him to come up here with a bulldozer, try to dig up a spring that he was sure was going to be here. It wasn't. Nice little easterly section of road. You can look off to the west there, road and several other people's property. The last little piece of the northerly section, I may have said easterly. We are now turning east. To the last stretch up to the flat area on top here, which is the helicopter pad. The last turn going west. Of course, we're turning right into the wind here. And as sweaty as I am, you're going to really get cold if you stop. We have just gained 1,200 feet in elevation over 2 miles, which kind of equates to 10 to 12% average grade. I did that in a half hour. That's a whole lot slower than what I used to do it, since I have been unable to do this since 2008. You can see the Keith cabin, and then their, what I call their trailer camp hill, where their water tanks are. Right down below them used to be a geodetic dome. And then beyond there is George Hart's cabin. On the way down, I will narrate and reconstruct the last few hundred yards coming up to Mrs. Keith's gate. This whole thing, of course, ended up with her doing a private party arrest for trespassing. Which subsequently later was amended to be assault by throwing rocks at her. Supposedly because she had a camera out on me, and I was trying to get her to talk to me. In response to a question in deposition as to what she was doing up that early with a camera, she was there to catch me, because ever since the previous April, I have been going up onto the helicopter pad there with binoculars, standing up there and watching her. Although I'm not sure which one of her homes she might have been in, and what you can see, and what I'd want to see. But she had the camera video recorder, what it was, ready to get some evidence. She said she just happened to look up and was shocked to see me standing there on the other side of the tractor, just staring at her. It was kind of unsettling because usually I run right on by and going up to the hill and watch out from up there. This time I was just standing at the tractor watching her. Where Paul normally fed his horses that morning, in the morning. Like I say, it's strange he wasn't out that morning. Now as you come around this corner, in the view comes their water tank hill, and Randy was parked up there in his pickup, and as soon as I came around, he started backing down the hill. By the time I got into where I could see where he went, he was driving into the gate towards the cabin, and he drove up to the cabin and parked. Now about this time, after he got up there, why, I saw her walking up the driveway with left hand up to her eye, and I assumed that she had a camera. Closer I got, I saw it was one of those, it was a white mini cam, box shaped cam recorder. Now as I got closer, she began screaming, "Get off my property! You're trespassing!" I figured she was probably speaking that way just for effect, just for documentation for later. And I hollered, "I'm not on your property, I'm on Ogren's property." And then Randy stepped out of his truck and says, "Go away and leave us alone." About that time, their two dogs came out, Kaya and Shadow. And of course they used to love to go run with me, so they were just out there jumping and wagging and so forth, and they hollered, "Come here, a bad dog, come here." So I sent them back away and continued on down the road here. And as I came around this corner, I noticed that they were standing up on the hillside up here above me. And I could hear them shouting something. No idea what it was. I just continued on home. Now she subsequently got that line surveyed, which would show that those two wooden posts that Paul put in there for his signs and his fence post to be the property line. She actually hijacked my surveyors that I had hired to come out here and survey the road and survey some other properties. I couldn't find my surveyors one day, and there they were up there with Elaine. She apparently had called Mike Stanton and said, "Hey, can I use your guys?" So that was like in the next February, actually, when she finally found exactly where her line was. So obviously the trespassing charge was foobar. That gate is right there next to Paul's corner, and it follows the road that goes down to his springs, where he had code enforcement come out here. Matter of fact, it was more than code enforcement. It was Cal Recycle, which is Cal EPA, who had done flyovers, and they decided that he had hazardous waste, and they came out here with a 16-man crew, including 6 sheriff's deputies with M16s. They swore out warrants against 5 of us, including me, and Paul and Marty, Rich and Snyder, and Robert Garcia. All based, we suspected and found finally that Elaine had turned Paul in, turned Marty in. Marty had a bunch of barrels that she claimed had hazardous waste in them, and there was, wow, what a mess. The public health people and EPA and so forth, they actually came up here and dug boreholes in Paul's property up on top where his water tanks are, because Elaine swore that she had seen him burying computer waste up there. They did find some lead contaminated soil, because Paul had a camper up there that when Logan Ridge fire in 1997 swept through here, burned him out, and his computers up there, and it burned up the computers. So he had to dispose of the contaminated soil. When they couldn't find any hazardous waste hauler to take such a small amount, it was like 5-gallon bucket worth, public health people allowed him to do a cementitious disposal. He mixed it up with cement, a bag of cement, and dug post holes and used it to concrete in his post holes. You can see my fifth wheel down there. Looking down at my tanks, and in the distance there you can see John Crabtree's home. And beyond that, the road as it heads up and over Windy Ridge. Just beyond the tanks there is what has been called Garcia Road. Actually, the road there is on Crabtree's property that you see running up the spine of that ridge. She actually sat up there up at her place one time and took like 100 photographs of me coming down that ridge. Claimed that I was 300 yards away from her, violating my restraining order, and I had binoculars and a camera and was taking pictures of her in violation of the restraining order. She subsequently, that was in January of 2010, later on in March, I believe, of that year, or maybe later, took 150 or 200 photographs of me out there at what we call the salt flats. And turned them into the cops. For what purpose, I'm not quite sure. Another video she turned into the police was her driving down right about here. This is, of course, my property. She's driving across my property, and she says, I'm just coming across Heller's property now, and I see him driving down Garcia's Ridge, which is a place where he could be in view of us, in view of our cabin. I wonder what he's doing. So that video continued on all the way till she got around the next couple of corners, and then picks up with, I think, about 4 more. Finally, she ends up on the top of 3 trees, top of Heath's Hill, which is almost off the property, off the ranch, and says, yeah, here comes Heller. You can't see him right now, but he's sitting up there watching me. And we're always worried about leaving our dogs. We've got them with us now because somebody poisoned our dog. And, so we got to be so careful. Of course, in their lawsuit, they claim that I had poisoned their dog. To be continued. Now my property continues on around. And usually in the morning I would go ahead and go on up there and turn my water on, or turn it off from the night before. Or maybe just run on down the road for a little extra exercise. As you're coming down to this steep area, and by the way, I had to, Elaine was down here with her truck one time, one of many times, but she couldn't get up this hill. She insisted on keeping this 2-wheel drive Toyota pickup she had, so I had to come up here. Drive her out. But this is pretty steep, and coming down is worse than going up. I've actually sat on my butt a couple times. Your feet slide out from underneath you. My little travel trailer down there, that's where I used to camp out. That was my second home until I bought that 5th wheel from Paul, and we moved it down here. returning home, where I would take a shower and have breakfast, usually on that patio there. Overlooking Chimney Lake. So it's actually, on this round trip was an hour, which is a whole lot more than it used to take. Charlie Lake down there. And sitting here, you can see the road going up. That's Chimney Canyon Road. And that day I sat here and I watched them drive out, thinking, what would they be leaving the ranch on a Saturday morning for? That don't sound good. Well, it wasn't. They were going down to meet a cop. So, 2 hours after this alleged incident, they made a 911 call. Said I'd been trespassing. Didn't say anything about assault. Just been trespassing. I was actually put in, handcuffed and jailed for trespassing. The cops who showed up right on that stairway shocked the way out of me. I was standing there talking on the phone to John Crabtree. And I said, you won't believe who just walked in here. There's 2 cops. And I says, they told me they were going to arrest me, and I said, well, go up to the crime scene. You'll look at the footprints. They're fresh. I don't have to. I'm not the arresting officer. Turn around, put your hands behind your back.